Hello and a very warm welcome to Bharata First. You're watching Big Picture with Frank Pereira. And since you're here, I would like to thank you for your continued support. For those of you who haven't already subscribed, please subscribe, hit the bell icon and then all notifications. Do follow our social media handles for all the latest updates, and you can also subscribe to our weekly newsletter to get some incisive content. The Bharata First team is running a daily quiz. The winner will get to interview me in a program called Hot Seat, which goes on air at 6 p.m. on Saturdays. Details are in the description of this video. There is also a contribution link for those who would like to come forward and contribute to keep this content alive. Do continue to show your love and support because I need it now more so than ever. Now, amid the surging pandemic cases forcing many states to curb mobility and businesses, a report has said these localized lockdowns in key economic hubs can cost the economy an average of $1.25 billion each week and may shave off 140 basis points from the Q1 nominal GDP. If the current restrictions remain in place until May end, the cumulative loss of economic and commercial activity could be around $10.5 billion or around 34 BPS of nominal GDP, British brokerage Barclays said. A case, or rather as cases mount each day, a number of states, including that of Maharashtra, that accounts for close to 48% of total infections, and Delhi have announced mobility curbs. Over 81% of these cases are concentrated in just 8 states, but most of them are also the most economically active states and therefore the impact on the economy. Meanwhile, another global ratings agency, Moody's Investor Service, said the second wave of the pandemic posed a credit negative risk to India's economic recovery. In this edition of Big Picture, we will analyze the state of the Indian economy. Joining me on the program today are Vinita Hariharan, public policy expert, Dr. P. Pulla Rao, economist, and Dr. Ajay Dua, economist and former Secretary, Government of India. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of Big Picture. Mr. Dua, let me start the program with you first. Let's first try and understand and analyze the state of the Indian economy. Where are we at? What's the situation like?
Frank, I would be very frank. Sorry for the pun on the word. The situation till about a week ago, if you'd asked me this question, I would have given you a reply which is different from today. We were on a recovery path. Whether it was uniformly spread across the sectors, across the regions, is one question. But we had seen, at least in the last 4 months, starting November, say Diwali to Holi, it was certainly, we were coming out of the abyss we had sunk in the first 6 months or the first half of the previous year. And even the services sector, which constitutes the largest component of our GDP, that had started recovering. Whether it was transportation, hospitality, travel, or even if the financial services, which had started seeing an uptick earlier, it was, I would say, it prompted a lot of Indian regulators like the RBI, the government itself, as well as the rating agencies, international, private, as well as international, to be optimistic, saying that during the first half of the year, we might have seen a decline, but the second half would show a recovery and that the year would end at about 8% minus GDP growth. For the next year, that's the year we are in, everybody was very hunky-dory about it, to the extent people estimated that the GDP growth revised upwards only 15 days ago by IMF, saying it might be even touching 11.9 or 12% in nominal terms, but in real terms, with 5% inflation taken into account, or 5% plus, it will be between 6.5% to 7%. That was the situation till the second surge started. But going forward, I think a lot of our estimates, projections would need to be revisited. I say this from the experience of the last pandemic, the first wave of the pandemic in India, where roughly we lost during the 14 months that we saw the first wave. I'm saying early March to almost the end of March here, 13 or 14 months, a GDP growth on an average of 1% plus. We were plus 5% the previous year. We saw minus 8% this year. So 13% lost over 13 months means roughly. The intensities vary over the time. A 1% loss per month is what it affects.
Right. Vinita Haryana, let me bring you into the picture now. Let's look at the MSME sector per se, and focus on that for a little while. What's the story as far as MSMEs are concerned? What is it that they tell us?
Yeah, absolutely. Before that, I would just like to agree with Ajay Duaji that there is going to be a correction in the figures in estimates, which is looking very positive the last quarter. So we had about 11.5% projection, but Moody's, the rating agency, has also revised our projections to about 10.8%. So not so much of a contraction; it's only 7% contraction in 21, because we are optimistic about the V-shaped recovery, V as in vaccines, and 300 million is the target by the year end, and they've already done 100 million faster than many other countries. So on that optimistic note, as far as the MSME sector is concerned, the government has been doing quite a bit actually, right from the Atmanirbhar package, which was announced during the lockdown, the peak of the lockdowns in 2020. Wherein we have about 3 lakh crore of the budget infusion into the MSME sector, which was for distressed assets and as well as for liquidity infusion during the COVID. And more than about 50 lakh MSMEs have actually absorbed this liquidity infusion from the banks. So that was one measure. Apart from that, the MSME sector per se requires a lot of rehaul, because it's spread over various departments. MSME includes the Food Ministry, includes the Rural Development Ministry, includes various other ministries, because there are a lot of small enterprises in all of these sectors. So the ministry is trying to streamline all these departments and looking at World Bank funding for this, called the Raising and Accelerating MSME Productivity or Performance. It's called RAMP. So we're working on that program now, which is about 1,000 million USD to come in. 500 from the World Bank and 500 from the Government of India. So we've just recently got the approvals for that. So that will actually give a new look to the entire MSME sector, strengthening the last mile delivery as well as helping better coordination at the national level.
Absolutely. All right. So, Dr. Pularao, do you share the optimism as some of the other rating agencies have shared, where they've said that the recovery will be V-shaped, where we'll see a double-digit growth in 2021? How would you look at that?
To the extent I agree with Mr. Ajay Dua, it is unpredictable happens. What was last week and the situation has changed today, I agree with him. But economists are taught nearly since 200 years what Proudhon said, the unpredictability, of the unexpected. This is what happens. This is what you're supposed to be ready for. What happens last week, situation is different today, next week it may be different. Therefore, I think that our government and governments across the world are geared to expect unpredictability, factor it in, and the cyclical nature of economies has kind of been controlled in the last 40 years. Economies used to be cyclical, as both our esteemed friends would say. Now, economists and governments reduce the extent of the cycle and try to keep the economy on an even keel. Those tools are very much available. They are open secret and everybody is handling them. Therefore, I am quite optimistic to the extent that now governments across the world feel now we can handle coronavirus. And one of the foundations of running an economy is optimism. Optimism is something which has no solid figure on it, but it helps. Expectations. that the government will somehow handle it, that the government will take care of it, government will manage this crisis, that itself helps keep going an economy. And you don't save money, you don't put it in your mattresses, you try to lead a normal life, you try to keep spending. And also, what other economies are doing for themselves impacts the Indian economy. For example, the US $2 trillion latest, the relief they have given, it helps India very much. We are dependent and linked with the software and other things, with the US and other countries. It helps us. So to come back to give you a small answer, I'm very optimistic. And though, we may not reach the figures that they have been talking about, the rating agencies, but we'll be in a very good place. Yes, the second wave has come. Everybody says this is going to upset everything. The last 2 days, a number of articles have come out that the demand will collapse. I can't predict, but I know that there will be a third wave of coronavirus, as Germany and some other countries are saying. So will our government manage this? Yes. State governments in India are having trouble. They fumble, but they're getting up. They're trying to tackle it. We're not like, I hate to mention other countries which have not done so well on this sad coronavirus, but we are doing okay. So we can be optimistic. And don't forget, our agriculture sector did well during the crisis, is continuing to do well. And the other problems in the agriculture sector have been kind of settled down. So I'm optimistic. And though not to the extent which certain agencies do it, but things will go on well. We'll handle it. The capacity is there, both with the people, with the government. And I think we can look forward to that V-shaped recovery, which most of us talk. And then, of course, the negative or pessimistic way some people talk about the K-shaped recovery. So in between, there is a path. And I think we can find that path. We have found it maybe, and we're going ahead, and things look okay.
Okay, things look okay, not very bright, but things look okay. We can find a middle path, is what Dr. Pullarao is suggesting. Mr. Dua, let me come back to you now. Would you say that we are better prepared today than we were about a year ago? Should we or could we have done something better?
Frank, the answer is in the affirmative. Certainly, we are having experienced one wave of it. We are better prepared. We have experience under our belt. But that's true of almost everybody in the world, because there's hardly any country which escaped the pandemic. Having said that, going forward, while we can make use of that experience, and I think the Prime Minister and the central government is already doing that, saying leave it to the states to decide how much to clamp down on movement activities rather than do it centrally, because there was a view earlier that India is one country, no doubt, but it has so much of variety, so much of differences. The state governments who have healthcare as their direct responsibility are better placed to control the virulence or the spread of the pandemic. Having said that, let me, friends, while I like to share Dr. Pullarao's optimism as well as Vinita's very scientifically put kind of MSME's role and how MSMEs can remain the backbone of the economy with all that's happening. I would say, let's keep our fingers crossed that the second mutant, which might be called the Indian variation, it might be spreading fast, but it is not as intense in effect as the first one, which means that the fatalities, etc., are fewer, though more people may be getting infected. And the biggest hope and expectation is that our vaccines, which have already been discovered, on which work had started right earnest all over the world, right in the month of March or April last year. And by June, say for instance, our SIL Pune was already making trials in the month of June itself. That these vaccines are able to control the new variants of corona, including the so-called the Indian variant. Otherwise, we might be where we were if these vaccines, which are already created, the adenovirus ones or the mRNA new ones, they may not be effective on what we have, what they have been kind of prepared, made for. Third, I would say, whatever we might say, if even one part of the country gets affected, and if it happens to be as commercial, as financial as Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, Gujarat, or Karnataka, and I would even now say Haryana, the entire supply chain in the country gets affected. Because this is where Frank, I draw your attention to automobile industry. The semiconductors which were coming from China go into almost everything. Those semiconductors, either the Chinese are not making them available to the rest of the world, or they themselves are in short supply. And look at what's the effect. Our automobile industry is affected. The and that for us, that is a very important industry with 4 to 5% of the GDP, and 48% of the entire manufacturing being based only on automobile components and servicing of automobiles. That industry gets affected. So my submission is to my colleagues on the panel and to you is, yes, we have some experience under our belt, but let's pray, keep our fingers crossed that all that experience comes in handy, all the preparation comes in handy. But having said that, let's not underestimate that the GDP is not going to be, or let's not, I won't say convince ourselves that GDP will not get affected. See, the services which constitute 55 to 60% of the GDP, depending upon the year, if the movement of people gets affected, and services sector means labor intensity. What will that lead to? Movement gets affected, the production will start getting affected, production starts getting affected, inflation will increase, something which the RBI is so concerned about that it should be kept in the range of 5%, it could shoot up to 7%, etc. And the real wages will fall as we see in the first six months of the year. And all right, services sector go, the agriculture about which Dr. Pulara talked rightly, 3% growth of agriculture could become, even if it becomes 4 with third good year of monsoon, which we are expecting, agriculture imports becoming, industry will prosper. But let's remember that agriculture, labor intensive, it might be, but the contribution of agriculture to the GDP is only 15 to 16%.
Sure.
So I am keeping my fingers crossed, hoping that Dr. Pulara is right. But going forward, I do fear, I have apprehension that things may not be proceeding in that manner.
Absolutely. All right. So, Vinita, let me come back to you now. Let's talk about what the key indicators are telling us. What's the story that they are painting right now?
Yeah, as I said in the last session, that our rating agencies have not projected such doomsday the story, so it's just a contraction of 7% coming forward. So because I think when you talk about the responses to COVID-19, trailblazer economies like UK and the USA have failed to tackle this adequately. So I think comparatively, India has done much better given all its complexities and demographic challenges. We still have emerged quite a strong winner in this race. And so I think the first response, that was the short-run measures, it was a complete reactive measure to the COVID is over. That phase is over in which we were infusing liquidity and into the MSME sector and into various other sectors. So I think that phase is over. Now we're getting into the preventive measures. We've already got the vaccines in place, and now we have to look at how to reorient our mechanisms to from interactive and distant chains is between interactive and distance social distancing chains. Like Ajay Duwaji just mentioned, the supply chain shouldn't get affected. So we have to actually, it's very, it has to be a discerning kind of a governance wherein we actually give impetus to the to the supply chain logistics sector, the manufacturing sector, give impetus to them not to impose lockdowns on these sectors, whereas the service sectors and all of the others, wherever it's possible to work from home, I think there should be a perspective towards that, and especially in the government sector, there is still this a mindset that blocks them from allowing employees to work from home, and so I think that has to change. That perspective has to change. So with that itself, there'll be a relief to the entire congestion that we face in cities. So I think that should be the way forward now, and also readapted economies. Like for example, we retrain our engineering workers to manufacture PPE kits and masks, etc., which we were doing in the last time around during the intensive lockdown that we had. So I think the government is not going to go in for intensive lockdowns, and it should not also. It should just have this kind of staggered mechanisms for various sectors depending on the nature of work that they do.
Absolutely. Right. So, Dr. Pullarao, what are the sectors that we need to watch out for really, and what is it that some of the key sectors are telling us at the moment? Do you believe that certain sectors need special hand holding, especially at a time like this?
Definitely, I agree with what Mr. Ajay Dua said. The service sector is not contributing or is not going to contribute as much. It is impacting our economy, employment, and way of life. Having said that, you have to make do with what you have. Optimism is a very heavy burden, but I'm ready to bear it in the sense that government is calibrating other things. Yes, agriculture does contribute only 18% of GDP, but it employs 45%, 50% of people. So in their life, if there is improvement, that means you have impacted 50% of people and not only statistics. Perhaps the 100 richest Indians may progress at 10%. Their income may have increased in the last year, but if 50% of Indians, their income increases at 3% or 4% or 10% in the rural areas, it has an impact. What I really look forward for the government is, yes, we also forgot that coincidentally with the coronavirus, we had a huge defense problem hovering over us, and a distraction was there for the government and all the agencies. That seemed to have gone a little behind. Government is focusing at the moment on employment schemes in a very serious way, and as Dr. has just said, Vinita has just said, the MSME and other sectors, they're pumping in money trying to get results. So I would straight away say we may have a repeat of what we saw. The second wave may continue indefinitely. Nobody can predict it. But if the government focuses on employment and sustenance, because this is an emergency time, there are sectors which are working from home and contributing greatly, economy is going forward, all of that. But there are other sectors which are unable to contribute. So government should focus again. Maybe I would think, is it time for another relief plan for the people? You can review, not that we are past the crisis. Is it the right time to preempt a slide back of what we have achieved welfare wise, income wise, employment wise? I would like to think like that. I would like the government to wake up and say, why wait till the crisis is upon us? Why not help the people, with a plan again, so that there's money in their pockets, demand is stimulated, and things go forward. Rather than saying, something on industry, new plans, infrastructure, I would like to look at the human angle, give them employment, give them relief, because you have to plan for 2 months, 3 months, 6 months of this lockdown, the second wave. So having said that, I believe that government should go back and see where it has made certain mistakes. Though government won't admit it, it has admitted there were certain shortfalls. Look back, attend to the human angle, then the economic angle, the economic figures, the statistics will get better. So I look forward to that rather than any sector. Yes, one small word, I agree with what Mr. Dua has said, China, the semiconductors and rare earths. But that's being taken care of by other countries. You see, a monopoly has only a certain amount of life. Immediately there is a reaction to a monopoly. So basically, can you come up with plans to take care of our people, human resources, which will stimulate demand and confidence? We don't want reverse travel of migrants. We don't want all that same chaos that went on last time. So you have experience, and I hope it's used well at this challenge.
All right. Time to get quick closing comments now from all my panelists for the best way forward. Starting first with you, Mr. Dua.
I, what I would like to emphasize is that the government has to lead, but the government can lead to the extent the economy is dependent upon governmental action. We have the share of the government in our GDP, the share of the government in the capital formation, the share of the government in employment is a particular set, limited, and a lot would depend upon how outside the government action takes place. Government has a role, vaccination, government has a role in all the other regulatory matters, and as well as giving relief to the people like what it gave last year. But as we saw, the government's hands are tied. Given our fiscal situation, the government can do only up to a point relief. The government is not able to match what the European economies or the United States economy did as stimulus measures. So let's be clear about that. Yes, some amount, facilitators' role, yes, but now look at the constraint. The pandemic is going to make things worse for the banking sector. The NPAs will increase. The moratorium, which the Supreme Court ordered very recently, that moratorium continuation need not be there, okay, agreed with the government step, and that the banks should bear it, etc. All that is fine. But the condition of the banking sector upon as an instrument which was used widely in the first phase for the government stimulus to reach, that you might see their hands being tied, their ability to assist could be down. Second, I fear that going forward, the government would again, if the pandemic lasts or the second wave lasts, the government would end up spending much more money on relief measures of the kind which happened last time. That means to save lives rather than livelihood, whether it was free rations for some, the kind of more extensive healthcare, those kind of things the government will probably end up spending its money on. Though there is a silver lining there. I'll be very happy that in the process, the Food Corporation of India's stocks will reduce. Today, they are at
Right.
the record high. So Food Corporation is sitting with food of the kind which it has never had, the unmilled paddy, processed paddy of last year, and the wheat, and the running, finding short of space in its go down elsewhere for the current year's procurement. So let its stock get depleted. Government pay for it like the government has done, cleared all the past dues, which amounting to 3.49 trillion rupees in one shot. Government cleared them on 31st March. So the government owes nothing more to the Food Corporation of India. Current accounts also it can clear. That might be useful to keep the lives going, etc. Having said that, I would just make one other remark that going forward, the government they could be is certainly better prepared. Let the government give a freer hand to the state governments. It might be a national defense, NDMA act is central, etc. The experience tells us that the state governments are better equipped. The center, the role which it has adopted in the last 1 month is the way forward. States, if they do not have the last say, they tend to pass on all the blame to the center, like we saw in the case of vaccination.
Right.
The center says we have provided enough vaccination. State says they haven't reached us. They haven't disappeared. They are somewhere, but they put it upon the center. So if the states have a greater role in relief measures, I am quite sure that they will be more up to the job. and they would be more being closer to the people, they might also turn out to be more effective in giving the relief, much needed relief, which people need at this point of time.
Absolutely. Vinita Hariharan.
Yeah, absolutely. So going forward, I think what we need to work on is the center-state relationships and how the states effectively manage their funding and their resources. Because as we see, statistics centers' capital expenditure has been very high over the last 1 year during the COVID, but the states haven't been commensurately spending their budgets, and there is certainly a mismanagement at the state level. So the states need to get their act together in terms of even vaccine rollouts and expenditures, budgeting, etc. The center is running into deficit now, even despite the high GST collections. There's still a deficit of about 14%, fiscal deficit projection of 14%. So the states have to cooperate, and the center and the state have to work together to ensure that the vaccines reach all the entire population, and all, not only the vaccines, and also in fiscal management, there needs to be prudence on part of the state. That's one. And the second is the migrant laborers. I think we need to really focus on that and help them to get better infrastructures wherever they are, help them, develop better housing for the migrant laborers. There's also a new policy in the housing department which focuses on migrant labor housing, so that they don't really need to flee their places of work when such a COVID outbreak happens. So I think these are the two things that the government should focus on immediately. And in the long term, of course, there should be a lot of health spending, which the government has already done, the PM Swasthya Yojana. But that needs to be implemented in the right spirit, with a lot of private sector participation also included in it. And of course, a lot of spending on R&D required for predicting such outbreaks, and to also help us gear up our health infrastructure in a better manner going forward.
And Dr. Pullarao, close the show for us with your concluding remarks.
Well, one of the most important things what we're looking back is we have to do vaccination, because vaccination, everybody says, is linked with the economy. May not be with control of coronavirus. Infection, you can't stop it. So I think we have the capacity, we have the means. Something must have occurred where it was a slow rollout. They should focus on vaccination. And also the other thing is, it was quite shocking that most of the COVID facilities have been decommissioned. The hospitals, the beds, the ventilators have gone back to the storerooms. I mean, that's high optimism, which governments can't afford such optimism. People can. So I would like to think that they should be very wary of winding up the show, anti-corona show, so fast. And they should keep an eye on this economy. Everybody prescribes, government will be doing something, hopefully correctly. But we have to get a better control of coronavirus. You see, you can't just pick up your stakes and say now it's over, which is what they have done. And the vaccination program requires very good supervision, dynamism, ambition, and I think that will impact the economy and the people. There I find a little shortcomings in the government, and perhaps they're rectifying it, what we have seen, the hectic activity in the last week. So I
Right.
would stress vaccination is equivalent to economy, is equivalent to corona control and growth.
All right. We'll have to leave it at that. Thank you so much to all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. What's coming out of this discussion is that the Indian economy is going through a difficult phase, but things are not as bad as they are being made out to be. We have learned from the past and seem to be better prepared now. However, we have to be proactive in our approach, preempt what might happen, and have forward-looking policies. We have to come up with relief measures before things turn for the worse, so that the impact is cushioned and the burden on the common man and stress sectors is reduced. Once again, thank you for your continued support. And for those of you who haven't already subscribed, please subscribe, hit the bell icon, and then all notifications. Do follow our social media handles for all the latest updates, and you can also subscribe to our weekly newsletter. The Bharata First team is also running a daily quiz. The winner will get a chance to interview me in a program called Hot Seat that is telecast or broadcast on Saturdays at 6 p.m. The details are in the description of this video. There is also a contribution link for those who would like to come forward and contribute to keep this content alive. Please do continue to show your love and support. That's it from me. See you again next time.